Many of you have studied World War II history already, and that includes some explanations about the Holocaust. The Holocaust was a premeditated, scientifically coordinated mass murder. I said an awful lot in this statement. After all, people die of illness, old age, war, many ways of dying, right? But at the Holocaust, you walked into the concentration camp and 90% of you were eliminated. So, how did it affect me? Like I said, I was growing up in Hungary, everything was going smooth, but by March of 1944, the Nazi army invaded Hungary. And by this time, the Nazis had at least 10 years of experience how to move people from their home to the gas chamber. So now, orders kept coming one after another. The first one was that everybody had to have the Star of David sewn onto their clothing. And without that, they were not permitted to go out anywhere. This is how it looked like. So, this is a minor thing. But the irony here is that even little itty bitty children who have no idea what that meant, they had to have the Star of David labeled on them. So this was discrimination number one. So next order, within about a few weeks, that all the Jewish people will be put into a ghetto. And I always explain this a little bit further. In America, we understand the word ghetto means that an ethnic group decides to reside in a certain location. But thank God they can get up and move somewhere else. But in my situation, once you were in the ghetto, you could not go out anywhere. You lost your jobs, lost your schooling, the whole life turned upside down. So as it happens, I lived in the big city, and my home became part of the ghetto. Now, before that, there were my parents, my brother and my aunt and uncle. We had 6 people living in the house. Now the police shoved in, literally, a bunch of people. So my home became the residency for 40 people. You cannot imagine what difficult conditions these were. People came from other parts of the city or maybe from the suburban areas on foot with just a little overnight bag. They were exhausted. They had to find a corner in my house to sit down on the floor just to rest up. And I always say that human behavior that you studied Psychology 1 was there. There was a quiet person, the crying one, the hurting one, the cursing one. All kinds of human behavior from their exhaustion. This was their way of expressing themselves. So now we are in the ghetto, and like I said, there were no longer schooling, they're no longer going to your job, you're incarcerated in this location. Now, this situation lasted for about 6 weeks. Now, compared to other countries like Poland, the Nazis came in, invaded their country much sooner than coming to Hungary. So the ghettos in Poland took many, many years for people to be incarcerated. But anyhow, back in Hungary, we were taken to the ghetto, and we were there for about 6 weeks. All of a sudden, we got the order that we'll be taken to another country because they need workers. That was the biggest lie of the world, but psychologically, it kept the people calm. Because after all, this is wartime, and they need laborers. You could understand that they need people. But like I said, that was the biggest lie. So now we got the orders that we have to leave the ghetto, and we had to walk clear across town on the main street. It was the most demeaning, terrible, discriminating feeling, because all the people were looking at you, cursing at you, but there were some decent people who pulled down their shades and just stayed indoors and said nothing. So now we arrived in the other part of the city to a brickyard. Why in heaven's name did they bring us to a brickyard? There's absolutely nothing there. Bricks, open field. I told you everything was planned out to precision. The brickyard was adjacent to the railroad tracks. And on my 17th birthday, they shoved us into these cattle cars. And when you kids come to the Holocaust Museum in Skokie, this is an authentic boxcar from Germany. And sometimes when I escort the students, I tell one youngster to go inside and please tell me about how many people would be inside for a trip. So the children say, oh, maybe 25, 30. Well, my dear, we were as many as 70, 75 people pushed into this space. There was standing room only. In order to allow my parents to sit down on the floor, I stood for 3 consecutive days. Now once they put us into this boxcar in Hungary, the only thing was inside 2 buckets. One for toilet, and the other bucket had filled with water. Except that bucket of water was never ever refilled. Now 1 bucket of water for 75 people, it disappeared the first hour. So of all the physical pain that a person has to encounter, the worst is thirst. It was already June, it's warm outside, it's warm inside in the boxcar, and you are so thirsty. Your lips are chapped, and the only thing you can focus on, if I could only get a drop of water. All other things just secondary. So nevertheless, we are in this boxcar, and as the train is traveling through Hungary, crossing the borderline, there's a beautiful mountain range there, and somehow or another, I got pushed to the itty bitty little window. The window wasn't any bigger than any of our laptops. So I look out there, and the train was crossing a field of beautiful mountainside. And in the distance, I saw a shepherd with his flock. And I thought to myself, how come he is there and I am in this boxcar? You see, I thought that the entire world was locked up in a boxcar. I couldn't even imagine anybody walking freely. So once his journey continued, like I said, we had no idea where they are taking us. We arrived to the concentration camp called Auschwitz in Poland. And now some workers come aboard the cattle car and tell us, leave your belonging here. That little suitcase, that the last of our belongings from home. Leave your suitcase here, you will get it later. Later never comes. So we exit this train, and the orders starts coming one after another. First of all, men were lined up in one column, and women and children another. and a group of Nazi officers would stand in front of you and point at you. The only thing we would be lined up as, women and children, and point at you and say, you don't say a word, just move like this. And my very young-looking mother, who was holding on to me, was ordered this way. So I motioned to my mother and I said to her, I'll see you later. Unfortunately, later never comes. So now a succession of happenings. They take us into a room and shave our hair, bald, and all the body hair is shaven. And if that's not bad enough, they spray disinfectant on the freshly shaven skin. And now remember, I'm a 17-year-old girl. What are 17-year-old girls doing? Fixing their hair. I wasn't any different. It was maybe 75 years ago, but a girl is still a girl as far as their behavior goes. But nevertheless, we look unrecognizable. So the way we got to know one another for the first day, we would look into their eyes and speak. And that's how we recognize our best friends. So now we are, can you hear me all right? Oh. Technical difficulties, excuse me. Okay, can I go? Yeah. Anyhow, so now they took away our clothing and they gave us some ill-fitting clothes, took away our shoes, and they gave us flip-flops, or what's that called? But you kids wear it at the beach, little sandal things. But it had a wooden sole, and in order to walk in it, it had a leather band across my upper part of the foot. It was horrible walking in it, ill-fitting, and it was just so good. Matter of fact, that leather band that held up my shoes, the bottom of it, rubbed out my foot. To this day, I have a scar there because we had no medicine to put anything on, and it just healed by itself. Okay, now I described how we looked. Now comes bedtime. Visualize a giant room, totally empty, and if you look into the size of it, imagine how many people would fit in here. I would say about maybe 250, 300. 500 of us were taken into this room. And layer by layer, we had to lay down on the wooden floor. The flip-flop shoes were our pillow, and the body hit next to you was your blanket. And we had to lay down like sardines, so 500 of us would fit into this space. In the room, they had a bucket for the toilets because for some insanity, we were not permitted to go out to the latrine toilet in the yard at night. And it was the silliest doggone thing because, visualize how you look, okay? In addition to that, I don't know how many times a day we had to line up like soldiers and they were counting us. So first there would be a survivor assigned to do the counting. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So we had to stand like soldiers. So they would do the counting. Then the Nazi woman guard would repeat the counting. Now the insanity here is, where in heaven's name could we have escaped to when we looked like hell, number one. Number two, the entire camp was surrounded by electrified barbed wire. You touched it, you were a goner. That's it. So this is how it was in Auschwitz, And when we were there for about a couple of days, we asked the old timers, could you please tell us how soon we're going to see our families who were directed that way? Inevitably, they would raise their hands and point to the 5 chimneys of the crematorium. And they said, that is where your parents are. We were in total denial until we had to realize the fact that the reality of this tragedy. Now here I am, 17 years old, all alone, and the lucky thing is that you always find somebody who's a mentor and a helper. So for my city, there were 3 sisters who kind of mentored me, helped me out. They were a bit older. So at least I had someone to talk with. A matter of fact, in the same camp, my middle school history teacher was also there. So sometimes she would take us young girls in a little group and say, okay, what should we talk about today? Try to get our mind away from all this tragedy. So I remember one time I said to her, could we talk about the French Revolution? Now don't ask me why I thought about that. Perhaps that was the last class that I took in her room, or that subject. Otherwise, the other tragedy in the camp was that we were not permitted to go back to the sleeping quarters all day long. Now this camp itself had no trees, there was no shades. It was just sunshine all over. And it was horrible. We had to remain in that space until evening. So many of our very light-skinned blonde girls were horribly sunburned. So food, I don't know if I should spoil your appetite. They gave us some mush that vaguely resembles cream of oatmeal, but it didn't taste as good as oatmeal. The first day, it smelled bad. The first day, we could not touch it. But then the following days, we just had to swallow it because there was nothing else to eat. So they gave us this mush in the morning, all day long, nothing. No water, no food. And then in the evening, they would give us a slice of black bread that it looked like that sawdust was ground into it or something. It was horrible. And some kind of a sausage they made out of horse meat. So, but when you are starving, hungry, you eat the dirt on the floor. It is so terrible. So this situation was taking place in my life for about 2.5 months. And then they had what you call selections. Every single day, you had to line up in a circle at the courtyard, and then they were looking at us, and mostly you had to kind of loosen up our clothing